Okay, so we're going to start looking at parabolas and ways that we can use factoring in order to help us with the parabola. So if we look at this case, to graph this parabola, we could plot points and we could plug in -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And we could plug it into the equation. And if we did that, if we plugged in the numbers all the way across, we could get our answers for y. So if we want to do it an easier way, we can just go to our calculator. And what I did was, before we started here, I went and I plugged in my equation here and I graphed it. This is what my parabola is going to look like. We're going to talk about in this question, what are the intercepts? So if we look here, we can see it looks like it's crossing at -1 and 6, and it looks like it's turning somewhere down at the bottom. It looks like a little bit past -12 and somewhere in between 2 and 3 on the y-axis, on the x-axis. So the nice thing about the calculator is we can go back to this table and it's going to give me my output values. So I'm just going to plug those in back here. So -3, it looks like we had 18. Put this in here. So -3, 18. I'm going to go back to my calculator. 8, 0, -6, -10. Wait for the 8, 0, -6, -10. Then I believe it was -12, and then for 3 it was also -12. Um, the problem is you'll notice that these are all positives going down to negatives, but it doesn't start to go back up again. And if you look at the picture actually crossed here, and it also crossed at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you went up to 6, you would get 0 for your answer. So these two places where there's zeros are what we call the x-intercepts. So our x-intercepts, if we look, it ends up looking somewhat like this when we graph it. So our x-intercepts are these points that it actually crosses the x-axis. So you can graph it, it's not always so easy to see them. So, but in this case, we know the x-intercepts were at -1 and +6. The y-intercept is the place that it crosses the y-axis. So that's where y is equal to 0. And you can see, that's where x is equal to 0. -1, 0, and 0, -6. So if x is equal to 0, it looks like we cross down here at -6, right? And that's this number right here. That's always going to be the y-intercept. So the vertex of the parabola looks like it's somewhere in between right here, -12. So to find the vertex, it takes a little bit of work, but it looks like it's somewhere between x equals 2.5 and y is probably equal to -13. That's probably where it's at. So let me cut to the chase. We're going to learn how to put parabolas into what we call vertex form. And to do that, actually this is intercept form, we're going to factor it. So if we factor this, this factors to x minus 6 times x plus 1. And we're going to solve for x. So we're going to make this 0. And then we're going to solve for x. So either of these factors, if it's equal to 0, will give me 0. So I can solve either of these parts for x. So I could say x minus 6 equals 0, or x plus 1 equals 0. We call this the zero product property. So in this case, x is equal to 6. And if you remember, that's the point that it crossed there. And x equals -1, and that's the point it crossed there. So those are your intercepts. That's a really cool way to find the x-intercept. The other cool thing is, if you just multiply these two numbers together, you get the y-intercept. So -6 times 1 gives me -6, and that was my y-intercept. So if it factors, we can use zero product property to find the x-intercepts, and we can just use the product of the constants to give us the y-intercept. So if we look at this example here, it's already been graphed for us. A represents the x-intercept. So where does this one cross? Well, these values here are -2 and +2. So -2. So the x-intercepts are -2 and 2. Okay, the next one we want to talk about the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is this point down here. It also happens to be the vertex. So 1, 2, 3, -4. So the y-intercept is -4. And as it turns out, the vertex, which is the point that it turns, is at 0, -4. So you actually have to give coordinates for the vertex. The y-intercept is not always the same as the vertex. When we looked at this example here, you can see that here is the y-intercept, but down here is actually the vertex. So this and this are two different things. All right, so I'm trying to get back to my screen. So next, waiting to get back. So if we look down here, we have some independent practice, and we're going to come back and do these in the next video.